Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host and elk hunting coach, Joe Giglia. You want to hunt elk? They live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Hunt Breakdown Series 2018. This is the second part of a 6-part series. This is going to be part number 2. This is going to be the camp. And with me, I have my lifelong hunting partner, Leroy Chavez, here. I call him Chav all the time. You'll hear us call him Chav. You'll hear Gilbert call him Leroy Chavez, Chav, or Chav Chavez. He kind of has that. So this whole podcast is going to be second part of the series, and we're going to talk about the camp. We're going to talk about how to select it, layout and setup, the different types of things like that. And remember, the whole idea of the Hunt Breakdown 2018 is you're basically getting a ride on our shoulder, getting in our head, to find out the whys and the wherefores of why we made certain decisions that we did. It's not that we have all of these different options. We already know what unit we're going to. We've already received our unit. We've actually, as we talked about in part 1, when we talked about the scouting, we talked about our different 4 selected areas. We had a spot A, a spot B, a C, and a D. These were different areas that we had planned and we had noted that were going to be our main hit areas when we came in to hunt. Now we had to consider the second thing. Where do you camp? Where, why, how? Those types of things. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the camp types, and that has changed a lot for us from when we first began.
Right, it really has.
Remember those days?
Yep. We started off with a mobile camp, and that was basically the back of our 1987 pickup.
Right.
So we moved from area to area depending on what we noted as far as elk sign. And that worked out for us pretty decent.
Yeah, in fact, the area that we're hunting in now basically happened, and this is a great, sometimes the most brilliant coach, the most brilliant person is the one who has to make a mistake and then deal with the consequences. And very early in our hunting of this one area, we actually got stuck.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I remember that, yeah. It was a wet summer.
It was one of the wettest summers we had ever seen. And we were traveling on a road, and you know how it is when you're rubbernecking, looking for sign, looking for elk. We're driving in, we're excited, and I veered off just a little bit, enough where a giant red ant pile had gotten soaked next to a spring. And we went down, man. I mean, we went down hard and heavy, and we got stuck. So we made lemonade out of lemons. We threw our tent out.
Right. Yeah. We couldn't move it, so we thought, well, we'll camp right here, and we'll hunt out of here. And we didn't really worry about getting the truck out of the mud till the last day.
Well, until somebody arrived.
Right. That's true.
We had to wait for some help. So here we are, and we're like, well, we're going to make the best out of this, and we start hunting. And we had an incredible hunt.
Right.
It was awesome. We were in elk all the time. It wasn't an area, and, this is what we talked about in one of our other podcasts, is a lot of people, they actually pass elk to go find elk, and that was what we were actually heading probably 10 miles from where we ended up getting stuck. And the country wasn't gorgeous. It wasn't beautiful. It was all thick oak brush. It was rough. It was rocky, but it was loaded with elk.
Right. And like Joe just mentioned, a lot of people drive right past the elk,
Yeah. So let's get back to where we're talking about camp type. Our early camp, like he said, was basically out of the back of our pickup. It was very mobile. So you want to think about, and we're thinking about, well, okay, for this camp, there's going to be 6 of us. So it's going to be Chav and myself, and we have 4 buddies coming in from out of state that are going to join us, but they're not going to join us for 3 days?
3 days into the hunt.
So we're trying to decide, and because of the numbers, that really helped guide. I mean, it's not going to be a small camp. It can be in some ways, and you could kind of keep it kind of mobile if everybody had one small tent. You did things out of the back of your vehicle. You parked, you threw the tent out, you slept there, and then if you needed to move, that's the way to go. And but for us, we had scouted this area, and there were a lot of considerations. So we decided, instead of going with a mobile camp, we decided to go with a base. And so this was going to be basically our base camp. And in doing that, we had to really, really take a look at where are we going to pick that spot, because now it's critical. If you're going to put 6 guys in some place, that spot selection becomes real important.
Right.
The area that we selected, the first thing that you got to remember is you don't crap where you're going to eat or where you want to find the elk. So you've got to really take a look at it. And if we have an area A that is our great area that we're going in, we definitely don't want to put ourselves in a position where our scent is wreaking havoc over the area. So we have to really take a look at a lot of things. And because we're hunting state land and it does have boundaries, we decided that we found an area, a drainage, that to the west of us had a real high ridge. To the east of us, that drainage ran east, and it's probably not a half mile to the boundary. So that drainage is basically, when the night's cooling and there's no winds, our thermals are heading down, and they're going down into the property that we're not able to hunt. Okay, so that's something that we're thinking about. We want to be able to hunt to the north, west, and south of us. Now, thoughts are, what is the wind predominantly in that area? Coming out of where?
Is it the east?
It's basically going to the east. It's coming out of the west, and it's going to the east. We generally get our winds out of the west, and they blow across. So then you start to think about, well, if you're camped on the east side of the unit where your area is, isn't that going to cause you some problems? So thermals is the big thing to think about. If we have the wind, we had a large enough ridge up there so that as the wind is taking our scent and it hits that ridge, if it does stay down with the thermals and the cool, it's actually going to go along the ridge and it's going to keep from going over the other side. That's a strategy for hunting too that we'll talk about. If there is no wind at all, our thermals are staying, it's going down that drainage and it's flowing to the west off the area from where the direction we want to hunt. That's given us the north and the south pretty free.
Right.
So when you got 6 guys in a base camp, there's going to be a lot of scent. So you really have to consider all of that, and there's some things that you need to do. Now again, like we talked about in the first podcast, this wasn't a backcountry area. This is a use area.
Right. Heavily used.
Yeah. So they're used to seeing people, smelling people. They're used to those types of encounters. And again, there's a podcast that we're going to be doing this evening that's going to be talking about scent. And we'll cover all that stuff in that so that you can hear about how that scent affects these animals. So we're at the head of the drainage. The wind and the thermals are giving us multiple options, because even if we go up the ridge in front of us, if we stay on one side of that ridge and there's no wind going across, well then our scent's still going to stay on that side, which lets us listen to what's happening on the other side of that ridge going into our hunting area. That's walking out of camp. So we have a walkout option. We can use the ridge effectively to hunt in front of us. We can get on that ridge and we can go north, and we can actually go south, and we can hear things happening because we're high up. As that day warms up, even if we have a wind that's going from the west to the east, the warmer air, as our scent comes off that ridge, is going to actually carry that up. Again, we'll talk more about that on this next one. So, in relation to our hunt options, A, B, C, and D, we wanted walkout option, and we did.
Yes, definitely. And we also have a drive out option. We're pretty close to a lot of forks in the road, so we can drive out to other areas. Generally, we get good results right off the bat, but if we can't find them, we can drive out to a totally different area and hunt there. So the drive options are readily available.
And we're going to talk about, in our next series after this, is going to be the plan, part 3. So you're going to hear what our plan was for day 1 and why we selected that. But we wanted our hunt area to give us walkout option and drive out options. We didn't want to have to head out of camp every day to be able to go and hunt. We didn't want to disturb the area so much. And we're in a good area. We're probably within a mile and a half of our target area A, with a lot of great hunting in between us. And it's all to the northwest of us. So even if we did have to hit west with the wind at our back, we weren't disturbing that area up there. Okay. So layout and setup. We want to make sure, number one, in our layout that we have an invisible footprint. We're hunting on state land, and we want to be good stewards of the land, so we want to make sure that we do a good job of, when we leave out of there, it looks the same as when we went in. There'll be some grass pressed down, but we want to make sure that, we have an area where we're not making a big imprint on that and damaging stuff. We have to think about protection, because there's 2 reasons you're going to need protection. If it's really rainy, like a monsoon season, like I talked about that we have in New Mexico. Do you remember what one of our nights was like?
Yeah, it can be pretty brutal.
How much rain did we get that?
I don't know, but it was in the inches.
Yeah, it was actually flowing through our camp like a river. I mean, one of the items that you need for your camp is going to be, you need to make sure that you have a good shovel, because let me tell you, we were digging trenches around trying to keep everything dry where we were at, and to move the water different places. But one thing that you got to think about is protection from monsoon or even sun. It really, what is it? Any of you guys that ever stayed in a tent when the sun's beating down on it? It's impossible to sleep in one of those things because you're like in a little oven on that. So, in order to do that, one of the most important items that we have when we're setting up a camp is a tarp. And even if you're going to have a tent, make a plan to pull a line and set up a tarp over top of your tent. It's going to give you a bigger area of dryness. It's going to give you double protection inside your tent, because we had one of our partners that didn't have a tarp on his tent.
Right.
And in the middle of the night on that downpour.
Yep, got soaked.
I mean, got soaked. And there were a lot of interesting words coming out of that tent that evening. But a double layer.
Double layer, right.
And not only just for the rain,
but for the sun, too.
But for the sun. It sure is nice during that midday. It's, elk hunting is brutal on the body anyway. Hiking and going up and down and doing all the things that you do from, before daylight till after dark. So if you can get someplace where you're in shade, where you can sleep and where you can be comfortable and get out of that sun, that really helps to keep you from being drained. So tarps are well worth their money, and they're not expensive. You don't have to have the greatest tent in the world if you have a good tarp, and a tarp isn't even going to come close. You go out to buy a tent these days. Have you looked at any of those these days?
Yeah, they're pretty pricey.
So we've had the same tent. Again, guys, we've been grinding it out for a while. We've had the same tent for probably the last 8 years. It even has a couple little pinholes in places up there for different reasons. But we put the tarp over top of it, and we really, really stay good like that. So it's nice to have that second layer, and it's nice to not have a hot tent. If you do have the afternoon to sleep in there, you can really sleep good. Okay. An important thought at your camp is your hygiene, especially if you're going to have 6 guys in there, and if you're in a back area camp. For us, and again, we'll talk about it in the scent podcast, but it's been real important for us. We've been bathers at camp.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's how we started, yeah.
Ever since we started. And for a long time, that was out of a plastic bin. We would just take a plastic tub, heat some water to try to get the water warm. If we could set up a tarp someplace to keep the water from hitting us while we did a little cup and water bath on that, we always stayed clean. So hygiene was real important to us. We've gotten to the point now over the years with gifts, and now we have a shower tent, one of those that you just pop up out there, and we take and we put a tarp around that, and it's nice. We've gotten these gifts. We're a little bit older now, so we have a nice little pump shower, and we have a nice place for us to take a shower out there. But let me tell you what, we've frozen it before.
Yeah, we sure did. No, it's a warm shower, after a hard day's work, so makes a big difference.
Yeah. Do you remember the river up at Tres Piedras?
Oh, yeah.
So,
we just stripped and jumped in, and it was probably, like in the 40s.
Oh, man.
After the initial shock, it warms your body up quick, but yeah.
Yeah, and afterward, after a cold jump and where you finally get your breath back and you clean up, it really felt refreshing afterwards. But man, you sure didn't look forward to it. So it's kind of nice now that we're able to do that. But there's so many different ways to be able to do that. You can do the tub just with a rag and do a sponge bath on that. As far as the types of things that you use for that, now it's really nice because you find them on sale at the end of the hunting season. There's a lot of that, I just call it green goop soap. It's a lot of the hunter type soaps that are out there. There's so many of them. We always put it on our Christmas list and hope people give that to us. Prior to that, what was our main thing that we washed with?
Baking
soda. Yeah.
And that was effective, but it clumps up, and when you use it a lot, and it kind of irritates the skin sometimes. So the soap's been a blessing also. Now,
the baking soda was great. I mean, before they created the wash stuff, we always did our clothes in baking soda as well. So baking soda, we brushed our teeth with baking soda, and so it's a great alternative. You can actually just powder it on yourself before you go out. Very cheap type of scent eliminator is baking soda. However, ladies and gentlemen, be very careful where you put that baking soda down inside them shorts, because it can get irritating, man.
Right. Those hot days are killer.
Yeah, it could be tough. All right, so we do a shower. We do a latrine area, and we make sure it's away from camp, and we have some camp rules about that. We take a shovel, we dig holes, and we always everything ends up getting buried back up immediately. So one of the things that we do is we make sure, again, there is no sign when we leave of us having been there. I mean, we had 6 guys at this camp for 11 days, and we left out of there, you'd have no idea that they were there. And plants got fertilized a little bit.
Right, yeah. We just revisited the area looking for sheds, and you couldn't tell there was even a camp there.
Yeah. So that's important to us. Another thing as far as hygiene with us, and it's not necessarily hygiene, but has to do with smell, is we do a dry camp. We do no fire. I am very particular about scent. I don't want to smell like a ham in the woods. Plus, I don't have to worry about anything if there's a dry year, and we've had our share of those out there. So I don't have to worry about putting out a fire, it causing a fire. That's the last thing that I'd like to have. And the other thing is, when you have a dry camp, it seems like you get in bed earlier.
Yeah, I think if you have a campfire, you tend to sit out there and just, talk and gossip and maybe drink a few beers and stay up all night long. So
yeah,
I think a dry camp, gets you to bed earlier.
Yeah, there's something. A fire will just hypnotize you, and you just kind of sit there, and it's very comforting. So we try to get into the bag as soon as possible in the evening. We set up a shooting range. When we do that, we just bring a small target. We try to make sure we have good backstopping area and try to do something where we don't have to worry about tall grass, so everybody's having to search for arrows. I do miss on occasion because we play some crazy games out there when we do that. And make sure that you're shooting away from camp, from vehicles, from other people. Always consider safety on that. Now, camp equipment and needs. I would say that 3 of your most important items, and you can always find a place to put these, are a shovel, a saw, and a hammer. Make sure you have those 3 things. I mean, they're indispensable when we're out there.
Mm-hmm. Then you want to have plenty of tarps, not just as a secondary cover for your tent, but to lay the animals on after you get them. And there's just so many uses of them. So it's good to take 4 or 5 smaller tarps, and then of course you need bungees like crazy out there, and the rope and the stakes. Yeah,
we prefer bungees to a stake rather than a rope. You can hard tie a tarp to a stake, and you get some winds out there, and it's either ripping up the tarp or it's tearing out the stake. And we like to use bungees from that to our stake because it gives a little bit. It still holds things pretty taut, but when there's a wind, it's not just that straight pull on there. And so each bungee on a different place on there, it reacts differently to it, and your equipment lasts a little bit longer out there.
You get a little give and take, whereas the rope, it's there or it's not there, and a lot of times tents come down.
And we have a bag. We have our tarp rope stake bag that all the stakes that we've gathered over the year, they stay in a little bag by themselves. We have the ropes and the bungees all inside there. And like Chav said, you can't go wrong with tarps. There's just so many things. We had an extra tarp when Gilbert was getting soaked this last hunt.
Right.
We were able to pull that out, get it over top of there, and sweep the water out of his tent. It was hilarious.
Yeah, he showed up with a brand new tent that was supposed to be waterproof, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
they forgot to spray the stuff.
Yeah,
in China, I guess.
Something didn't work right. Yeah. So, food. Chav and I, when we first started out here, and for a lot of years, man, we lived off bologna, Snickers. We had bread, bologna, mustard, and we would buy things like real inexpensive Pop-Tarts, and that would be kind of our carb thing. Not the most nutritious.
Right. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Peanut butter and jelly was
to go with the bologna. That was a treat.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we always lost good weight on a hunt. That's one thing we like about the hunt. Get out there in that mileage. But over the years, what we started doing was we would both make meals, so many meals for how we were going to be out there. We would have the bologna and stuff for lunch, but we would make a meal, make a big old pot of goulash or spaghetti or something like that, and put it in Ziploc bags. You could kind of flatten them out and put them in the freezer, and you would have, all you'd have to do is once you got back from the hunt, you throw that in the pan, turn on the heat, and you've got dinner. You're not out there all night. So one of my favorites is goulash. Be careful of what? What don't you want to be eating?
All the beans and stuff.
Yes.
Can kill you.
Yeah, be real careful.
Yeah, so yeah, we went through that phase where that's pretty much what we did.
Yeah.
And now that we have our Venezuelan connection,
so you'll hear us
it's
talk
a little
about
different now.
Manano and Luis, good buddies of ours from Venezuela, two of the best human beings that you'll ever meet in the world. We've really gotten to know them the last couple of years that they've hunted with us, and they are just super guys. Again, we're real picky about who's in our camp, and they've always had an open invitation to come back. They're just super. But they love to cook, so it's kind of nice, man. These guys come in and they spoil us with all these meals, and now it's a lot harder to lose weight.
Yeah, we're talking 5-star meals, and I have to remind them I'm not the same size as everybody else in camp, so don't load my plate up. But still, they do a good job. It's an excellent meal.
Hey, Manano, no means no. Yeah, so we have them now, and they do a lot of food for us. But still, me and Chav are out there for 3 days by ourselves, and we're back to the bologna, back to the peanut butter and jelly. And then when the chef shows up, it's like, yeah.
Right, 5-star chefs.
Yeah. In fact, on this hunt, we killed, as you know from what we killed 2 elk on opening morning. So we actually got to go down, and then when we came back up after being with the guys, we went back down at the end of it, and I think we gained a pound after it was all said and done. All right, so that's something for you to think about. It is your food, what you're going to have there. And if you're going to be in a back area camp, with food, we're not able to get in and just take off for ice. So we really have to think about our ice storage and our water storage. When you're doing just bologna and bread, we tried to keep it just as small so we didn't have to worry about that. When we did do a kill, we tried to get it down off the mountain ASAP. And I'm going to talk about the haul and what to do with the meat on the last part of this 6-part. So we'll talk about that then. But that's something you have to consider. How much ice do you need? Coolers are getting so much better these days. And if you really look around, it's, again, throw them on the Christmas list, or, because if you try to buy all that stuff at one time, it'll break you, because there's some of those coolers that of different makes and models that are really, really great. We've always... our cooler has just been Coleman coolers in the past, and we just try to make sure your secret to ice, so that it lasted longer, instead of buying it in the bags of ice.
Yeah, we're coffee drinkers at home, and my wife always buys the gallon containers of water. So when it's empty, we fill it up, put it in the freezer, and it's one large ice cube, and that lasts a long time. Or you could even use a Ziploc bag, gallon bag, fill it up with water, and then place it in the freezer, and that'll give you a nice ice cube that's kind of flat, so you can lay a lot more down there. So, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, because now, these days, man, a bag of ice is going to cost you between $2 and $3 a bag. And, you can put 10 to 14 sometimes in one of those coolers. And because they're a small cube ice, they just don't last that long. So,
right.
Creating your own ice in the freezer is really huge. If you have a chest freezer at the house, stack up those Ziplocs, put those gallon jugs, and they last a long, long time inside there.
Yeah, those blocks last forever.
Mm-hmm. And they really help you on a long hunt.
Yeah, if you have a Yeti and you put some of those in there, they're there the whole 11 days.
Right. So another thing, thing on our decision for our camp is sleeping comforts. Again, when we first started out, we were sleeping in the back of the truck, and which is super, man. I mean, we were mobile. We would take things out, put it underneath the truck to protect it from the rain. We always had the front of the truck, and it was a king cab, so we could put plenty of gear inside there. Everything stayed dry. Everything was safe. We were warm. We were off the ground. And what we did in the back of the truck is we took a piece of plywood and 3/4 inch ply, cut it in half, cut out the tire wells, and put them in so that instead of having to worry about the ridges, we had a nice flat bottom inside there. Put a couple of ground mats, and man, you're good to go. And then if everything isn't going well for the hunt, it's no problem, man. You just drive a couple miles and go to target B, and you're in another place.
Right.
Now, and you always got to check for the different areas you're in, because there's a lot of public land, either state trust lands or BLM or national forest, state park areas that all have different type of camping rules as far as that went. And that's one thing nice about being in the back of the truck. We really weren't setting up a camp. And if you hunted till the evening, you slept in the back of the truck, from where you parked that day, you didn't have to worry about the whole camp issue. So that was something that worked out pretty well for us. And now it's a little bit different because, like you said, we're set up a base camp. Want to make sure you have sleep comforts, man.
Right. And just going back to the camps a little bit, on occasion we'll just pack up our sleeping bags and a small tent and go do a drop camp somewhere. If we've noticed that they're coming in early in the morning or leaving early in the morning and coming in late at night, we'll just go set a camp and be there at that time.
Especially in the national forest areas where you can camp anywhere and stuff like that, the drop camp really works real good for us. So that's something so that we didn't have to come back and forth after long, long hikes. That's when we're doing a hunt where we're really hiking out far and finding animals away. The other type of sleeping comforts, man, make sure you have a good ground pad. If you're using cots, they go good. There's some guys that are using blow-up mattresses. Again, sometimes you can convince mom at home to, we need one for the guests and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I laugh because a couple of years ago, one of the guys brought this humongous blow-up pad. Remember that? He blew it up and couldn't get it in the tent.
Because he blew it up outside his tent.
I mean, that thing stood about 3.5 feet off the ground, and
it was huge, man. It was a deluxe Supreme Queen or something like that. Blew it up outside his tent, and it was comedy seeing him trying to get that inside there.
And even going further back, I can remember a friend of ours from the Jemez Pueblo.
Yeah.
They bought a mattress. And he's just lucky he happened on a horse to help him carry it. And that's another story about
We'll tell you that one another time. Another thing is, if you're somebody that the pillows really matter, bring your pillow, man. The only thing I would suggest is if you have a fleece jacket, my wife makes me a couple of fleece tops. And I have one of them as my camp fleece that I wear. It gives me a layer when I'm just sitting in camp so that, I come back and change my clothes. And I like to put that on the outside of my pillow because, if you're getting cold weather Septembers, man, at night that pillow can get really cold, and the fleece gives you just that little bit of layer, keeps your head warm. So that's something to think about. And I recommend to everybody, if you had the choice, I've had the same sleeping bag for 20 years. If you're going to have a bag, I recommend you have one that can handle the cold, because you can always open up. If you don't have one that, and you get really wet and cold like we did this year, and the temperature drops down at night, and you have one that's not handling that, you don't want to be miserable at night. So I recommend having a bag that can handle the cold, because you can always open that bag up. Camp chair is nice, a place for you to relax, for guys to sit around and make all kinds of those. But Walmart, you can get a chair from anywhere from $5 to $15. So, again, you have to pack it and you have to lug it, but there's an area on most vehicles and most trucks that aren't used above the roof, and it makes a great place just to put items like that so that you have them. You don't have to worry about them getting wet or anything like that. So I recommend a camp chair. We already talked about ice and water. For us, that's critical. One thing that we do try to do is we pull a little trailer in so far, and we'll actually park that someplace lower down with water in that area where we can actually take a four-wheeler truck and go without having to go all the way in town and pick up some more water. But we try to figure and have everybody bring so much so that takes care of us. I think we even ended up pouring out some water this year because it was so wet. We didn't drink as much, and it wasn't that hot. We didn't sweat as much. So
yeah, we did a good job with the water.
Your fuel. Be real careful about fuel. You got to make sure that you have enough if you're using a four-wheeler. If you're parking there, it just depends on how much you use coming in, but always have some backup fuel with you in case something happens so that you can get out. A cook box. We've developed a cook box over the year where we have one of those plastic gear boxes, and inside that has a real small cook stove. So that we can put our propane on that. It has everything, our utensils, our pots, our pans, salts, seasonings, it has all the seasonings.
All the condiments and plates, bowls, napkins.
And all the Ziplocs and stuff like that. So that becomes our camp kit. And it's great because we put things in it over the year. If the family wants to go camping, we grab the kit and we're off. And that, again, helps us to get all the things in there and make sure that it stays in there from year to year. We use lanterns. We use propane lanterns out there. So you got to carry your fuel, got to make sure that you have that. There's a lot of nice solar things happening right now, but we definitely need a lantern in one area where we do our cooking because it's generally dark when we get back. It's dark when we leave in the morning. So that's something to talk about there. You have to have a trash plan. Guys, please, whatever you do, take out more trash than you bring in anytime you go out into the woods. And we make sure we have good, thick, large trash liners, and we have kind of a trash plan where we like to put our plastic type stuff, if we have any of that, in one, with aluminum cans, paper in another one, and we try to keep things just separate like that. And you have to make sure that you have room to get that stuff out, strapped to whatever you have to be able to get out of there. If you're doing a different type of camp where you're mobile, you're hiking in, you're not going to have a lot of that. You're doing a lot of stuff in small, you're suffering a lot more, basically. So you're not going to have as much of that stuff. And you're going to, generally going to carry something to be able to get water out of streams, a filtering device or something like that. But that's not what's happening in this camp right here. Your tent, we've talked about large or small. We go large at a base camp. If we're doing the truck, then we go small, or we sleep in the back of the truck. So that's basically how that goes for us. So I would say that we've talked about the types of things that you need at the camp, but the most important thing I would tell you guys is your camp selection. Now, some of that is going to be dictated to you because in New Mexico, if you're hunting on state trust land, the way the rules go is that they have designated camping areas. I do not agree with it. We are permittees, and just like those people that lease those for cattle grazing, we should have the right as a permittee to camp anywhere on there. We're working to get some of that changed, but you can be dictated where to camp. And if that's happening, then you've got to think a little bit differently about your A, B, C, and D, because it can become NASCAR in the morning.
Real restrictive down there, and everybody's in the same area. So, but and the place they selected isn't very good either.
Yeah,
There's
for a
no-
lot for a
yeah,
lot of those.
hardly any cover, and it's a bad situation.
And I think that's one thing as sportsmen that we need to work to change. I think that right now it has a very negative impact on the area. But I guess the point being is that sometimes you're dictated where you're going to camp, and so you got to really think about those things. And sometimes you got to get out even earlier, just so that you're not behind a line of four-wheelers or UTVs or something like that, or trucks out there, just so that you can get moving. So spot selection is critical. If you're someplace where they do have access roads and you can camp along those access roads and a lot of public land in New Mexico, try to make sure that you have a walkout option, then you have your other options that you're going to drive to. Think about your scent. Try to do as good a job at that selection as possible, and especially if you are backpacking into country, it's even more critical because now you have super options about where you can camp so that you can get into animals right away, but you don't want to blow them out. So that's our tips for today on the camp part 2. Next time we get together, it's going to be part 3, and that's going to be the plan. So until then, from Joe
and Chav,
we'll see you later on the podcast, and we hope to see you on our website, which is now live. You can go to ElkBros.com, and you can go to our website. You can go to our podcast, go to podcast.elkbros.com and see that. And if you're going either to the podcast or you're going to our YouTube page, please rate us and review us. We want to find out how we're doing. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.